Welcome back to Recap Time. Today, we'll be delving into the action thriller movie called The Equalizer 2. Enjoy the recap. The movie begins with a picturesque train journey to Istanbul. Inside one of the compartments, there's a man who looks like a local Muslim, complete with a long beard and a cap. He appears to be engrossed in a book, but his real focus is on a family of three, a father, a mother, and their young daughter. This man, disguised as a Muslim, is actually Robert McCall, undercover and keeping a watchful eye. When the father gets up to go to the dining car, McCall does the same and strikes up a conversation with him. When asked about his purpose in Turkey, McCall reveals that he's searching for a Turkish man who married an American woman, had a daughter with her, and then mistreated and took the daughter back to Turkey. It becomes clear that McCall is talking about the man in question, and the man slowly stands up. After leaving the dining car, the Turkish man signals his buddies to deal with Robert. What they don't know is that they're about to mess with a highly skilled vigilante. Robert easily takes down these attackers, leaving them all sprawled on the train floor. Once he's dealt with them, Robert calmly returns to the Turkish man. He offers the man a choice, either face the usual pain or endure something much worse. The scene changes from the tense train to the busy city streets. Here, we see Robert working as a Lyft driver, driving a cool black car. He stops to pick up Sam, an elderly man with a complicated case of finding his long-lost sister. While driving, Robert often chats with his passengers, observing some while having conversations with others. His life might seem ordinary now, but it's anything but. Grace, the mother of the young girl Robert rescued on the train, visits her lawyer's office. There, she's met with the beautiful sight of her daughter, safe and sound. The mother and daughter embrace each other, filled with relief and tears. Robert's intervention made all of this possible, and their gratitude knows no bounds. However, Robert remains on the road, quietly observing, ready for the next passenger, and whatever life throws at him. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a home in Brussels. A man named Calbert enters, taking off his coat, expecting an ordinary evening at home. However, the sight that greets him in his dining room is anything but ordinary. His wife, face marred with bruises and blood, is seated at the dining table, crying. Before Calbert can comprehend the situation, a man coldly shoots his wife right before his eyes. The men then force Calbert to hold a gun and face it to himself. A moment later, a gunshot rings out. The narrative abruptly switches back to Robert, unfazed, continuing his job as a Lyft driver. He pulls up to collect his next fare, a man assisting a visibly distressed woman into the cab. She appears to be in severe pain, but Robert remains silent. Later, Robert arrives at the man's apartment, informing him that he'd taken the woman to the hospital, where they'd discovered multiple injuries on her. He advises them to do the right thing and attend to her, but the man attempts to attack him. With swift precision, Robert uses the man's card to slash him, subsequently breaking his and his buddy's bones in a swift, brutal showdown that lasts no more than 30 seconds. It becomes clear that Robert is not an ordinary man. His combat skills and ruthless efficiency show him to be extraordinarily dangerous, a skill he learned from his previous life. When Robert returns home, he's pleasantly surprised to find his old friend Susan waiting for him. They reconnect over dinner, during which Susan reveals that she's working on a high-profile murder case involving a couple in Brussels. Her partner on the case is a man named Dave. In the midst of their conversation, Susan gently reminds Robert that it's his late wife's birthday, a fact he'd forgotten. Concerned for his well-being, she suggests he make an effort to socialize more and possibly find a new companion. The following day, Robert discovers that Fatima's garden and wall have been vandalized. As he begins cleaning up the mess, a young man named Miles Whittaker approaches, suggesting that it's the landlord's job, not Robert's. After some negotiation, Miles agrees to repaint the vandalized wall for $350. Elsewhere, Susan engages in an online chat with Dave. They discuss the Brussels murder case and the puzzling fact that the victims were actually their fellow agents. In a bid to distract himself, Robert spends some time with Sam, a Lyft passenger who confides in him about being separated from his sister during the World Wars when he was just 9 years old. A treasured photograph confirms her identity. It's the same face immortalized in a portrait. Meanwhile, Susan and Dave arrive in Brussels to investigate the scene, as there is no evidence pointing towards a homicide. The case has been officially classified as the husband losing his mind and taking both their lives. Susan is visibly disturbed by the blood spattered on family photos. After thoroughly examining the crime scene, they depart. Susan and Dave head back to their hotel, discussing the mysterious circumstances surrounding the deaths of their colleagues. In the elevator, Susan bids Dave goodbye, reminding him to pick up some chocolate before they leave the country. As Susan enters her hotel room, she is ambushed by two men. Despite her valiant attempts to fend them off and managing to injure one, they overpower her, pinning her in the bedroom. Meanwhile, back home, Robert is spending time with Miles, imparting life advice. His peaceful moment is interrupted by a phone call from Brian, Susan's husband. His smile fades instantly, replaced by anger. Without a word, he abruptly ends his conversation with Miles and walks away. He immediately travels to Washington, D.C., to attend Susan's funeral, offering his condolences to Brian. He promises to bring the perpetrators to justice. Brian informs Robert that Susan never carried jewelry, implying her attack was not a random act of violence. Intrigued by this information, Robert decides to investigate Susan's murder himself. Using his skills, he decrypts Susan's phone to identify who she was communicating with before her death. He also hacks into the hotel's security system, gaining access to the surveillance footage, studying the crime scene photos and replaying the elevator footage repeatedly. He senses that something is off, sparking his intuition to unravel the mystery surrounding Susan's death. In another part of town, the two assailants who killed Susan are indulging in some leisure time. However, their revelry is short-lived as a cell phone rings. Upon answering the call, a bomb detonates, decimating their apartment. The orchestrator turns out to be one of the three men responsible for the cold-blooded murder in Belgium. Simultaneously, Robert reunites with his former partner, Dave. Dave is visibly shocked to see Robert alive, revealing that he had attended what he believed to be Robert's funeral. He expresses disappointment that Robert, despite their 6-year-long partnership, hadn't told him he was alive. Robert, ignoring Dave's reproach, informs him about his suspicion that Susan's murder was a premeditated act, pointing out the peculiar fact that she hadn't pressed her elevator button. Seeking answers, Robert delves into Susan's last case, suspecting it could provide insights into her murder. He mentally reconstructs the crime scene, visualizing himself present at the site. His sharp, analytical mind starts piecing together potential scenarios, attempting to unravel the sequence of events that led to Susan's demise. He contacts Dave and goes over the facts of Susan's murder and the Belgian couple's murder. Robert spots a common thread: both the crimes were perpetrated by a left-handed individual. This connection leads Robert to believe that the same person is responsible for both the acts and that there is a bigger, more complex picture to consider. As he ends the call, we see his apartment as a testament to his tireless pursuit of the truth, papers, and technology dedicated to investigating Susan's murder strewn all around. He then looks outside to see the wall half done and Miles nowhere to be found. He grabs his gun and leaves. He enters Hood territory and immediately knocks out the guard and takes his pistol. Upstairs, he quickly takes out 2 men, and then we see Miles hanging out with a gang. They give him a gun and tell him don't come back until the clip is empty. Robert shows them a proper gangster's behavior, and with dual-wield guns, he tells Miles to go. Downstairs, Miles goes off at him, but Robert tells him if he's so eager to be a gangster, let's jumpstart his career, putting a gun to his own head as Miles holds it. He buckles. Then Robert takes the gun back and gives him a mad lecture that his boys are merely just boys, nothing more. He tells him to decide his choice and leaves. He returns home until he hears a knock. He opens to find Miles there, telling him that he finished painting the wall. They talk for a bit until Miles says he can repaint his house wall, but Robert tells him he'll agree to it if he reads a book he hands him. Robert returns to his day job as a Lyft driver, picking up a seemingly ordinary passenger. The man is heading to the airport to catch a flight overseas to visit his daughter. However, as the journey progresses, Robert becomes suspicious of the passenger's odd behavior. His instincts prove right when the man suddenly brandishes a knife and lunges at Robert. Robert violently swerves the car, throwing the attacker off balance and stopping his attempts to stab him. Amidst the chaos, Robert manages to break his arm, forcing the man to pull a gun out. Robert is quicker, disarming him and ultimately killing him. To eliminate any evidence linking him to the passenger's death, Robert retrieves the man's phone and sets his car on fire with the remains inside the car. The following morning, Robert heads to Dave's house. Inside, he's introduced to Dave's wife and their 2 young girls. As the family heads off to start their day, Robert seizes the opportunity to share the unsettling events from his previous day with Dave. Robert sets the assassin's mobile phone he'd obtained and places it onto the table. He dials a certain number, and to their surprise, Dave's own cell starts to ring, unveiling him as the orchestrator behind the string of murders. Dave ends up confessing to his crimes. He rationalizes his actions by claiming he had turned into a mercenary after feeling betrayed by the government. The murder of Susan was a necessary evil. he argues, as she would have eventually unraveled his involvement in the Belgium murders. Following the revelation, Dave escorts Robert outdoors, introducing him to Resnick, Ari, and Kovac, the trio performing the killings under Dave's directive. In a bitter twist of irony, these are the very men whom Robert had trained while they were all in the CIA. Robert tells them that their mistake was killing Susan, and now each one of them will taste death. He promises that he will have his revenge for what they did to her, and then he tells Dave's wife that Dave said she can drop him off at the station. He adopts a playful gun-hand gesture, picking up Dave's daughter in his arms, which makes him burn inside. One day, Dave and his 3 companions head to Brian's house with the intention of harming him. However, their plan is foiled when they discover the house is empty. Anticipating their move, Robert had previously taken Brian to a safe location. Frustrated by their failed mission, the men change their course and head to Robert's house. Meanwhile, Miles is busy painting the interior of the house. Sensing danger, he quickly contacts Robert. Robert promptly accesses his surveillance camera feed and instructs Miles to hide in a secret compartment. From behind a two-way mirror, Miles anxiously watches Dave. Dave becomes suspicious of the mirror and is about to shoot at it when his phone rings. On the other end of the line, Robert claims to be at a location known to both of them. Thinking they've been led away, a relieved Miles comes out of hiding. However, his feeling of safety is short-lived as he finds himself cornered and at gunpoint by Dave's men. The story then shifts to Robert heading to a small town where he used to live with his wife. This town is being evacuated due to an approaching storm and hurricane. Despite the danger, Dave and his group arrive and forcefully enter the town, even killing an officer in the process. They search Robert's former home thoroughly but find no sign of him. Their search of the surrounding area also proves futile. Opting for an elevated vantage point, Dave stations himself on a tower to oversee his 3 colleagues as they spread out to locate Robert. Robert, however, outmatches his adversaries with his extensive experience and skills. He cleverly sets traps that his pursuers stumble into without realizing. Kovac, who enters a shop, thinking he's found Robert, is swiftly killed when a harpoon pierces through him. Ari tries to follow but is met by Robert, who skillfully slashes him, causing severe harm. Finally, Resnick, pursuing Robert into another store, meets his end due to an explosive trap. Meanwhile, Dave, perched on a tower with a sniper rifle, connects with Robert over the phone. He threatens to harm Miles, whom he has locked in a car trunk, unless Robert surrenders. Despite warning shots from Dave, Robert remains elusive. Just as Dave aims for the car holding Miles, Robert shoots the car's tire, causing Dave's shot to miss. In a frantic attempt to find Robert, Dave is taken by surprise as he discovers Robert already on the tower, leading to a face-off. Dave tries to stab Robert, but Robert's agility outmatches him, causing him to miss. Amid the violent backdrop of the looming hurricane, Robert retaliates by gouging out Dave's eye, grabbing his knife to impale him, and then finally slicing him from behind, killing him. Robert concludes by hurling Dave off the tower, where he meets his end against the jagged rocks below, and is subsequently swept away by the violent ocean waves. Robert swiftly moves to locate Miles, finding the young man trembling in agony from a gunshot wound to his leg. Robert transports the wounded Miles to his old home for first aid. Amidst tending to Miles, Robert finds himself gazing at a framed picture of his deceased wife Vivian. As the film nears its conclusion, we observe Miles on a bus en route to art school. Fatima, Robert's neighbor, discovers the mural on the wall that uncannily mirrors a scene from her homeland. An inscription on the opposing wall reads, "I leave you with the best of myself." The narrative unfolds to reveal Sam being reunited with his sister Magda. Robert had intervened, leveraging some strings to bring them back together. In the last scene, we observe Robert in his former home, deep in thought as he looks out at the peaceful sea, signifying the conclusion of this eventful journey. The end. Thank you for watching.